Well, good morning, good afternoon, my synthwaving friends. Alonso here from synthwavedojo.com, and today, as always, we're going to have a great session, and I'm going to show you what suspended chords are and how to use them in synthwave, or at least point you in the right direction. Great. Before we start, let me just remind you that you can head over to synthwavedojo.com/events and find all our upcoming events, master classes, group learning sessions, etc. And from that page, you can sign up to receive email alerts whenever we create a new event in our calendar. And you can also add from there any events to your preferred calendar. Cool. Hey, Bernd. How you doing, my friend? Hope you're doing fine. Same here. Great weather today here in Costa Rica. Hey, Blue-Eyed Cat. Synthwave Dojo members in the house. Appreciate the support very much, guys. Alrighty, so let's get right into it. Let me share a couple of things here. Okay, before we start, let me just preface by saying that suspended chords, this is right off Wikipedia, in case you wondered, a suspended chord is a musical chord in which the major or minor third has been omitted and replaced with a perfect fourth or a major second. So we're taking the third, either the major third or the minor third of a chord, which gives the chord the major or minor quality. We're going to replace it with either the second or the fourth. The lack of a minor or a major third in the chord creates an open sound, while the dissonance between the fourth and fifth or the second and the root creates tension. This is important because, and I'm going to go through all of this and show you how to create the chords, but I'm just trying to get you into the right frame of mind. And it is when we replace the third from a major or minor chord by replacing it with the second or the fourth, it's no longer a major or minor chord. It's like saying we have pepperoni pizza. We're replacing pepperoni with mushroom. It's no longer a pepperoni pizza. It's still a pizza. It sounds great. It smells and tastes great, but it's no longer pepperoni pizza, and that's very important because we can use that to our advantage. Okay. Because a sus chord has no third, like I mentioned, it's neither major nor minor. It's ambiguous to our ears, and it is unstable. It is tense. Okay, again, we can use all of these characteristics to our advantage in multiple ways, which I'll show you in a few minutes. Before we start playing with sus chords and all the ways of using them that I have prepared for you, there's a couple of things that I also wanted to mention, and it is that there's a misconception, at least I've seen it mentioned by people, that using sus chords immediately puts you in an 80s vibe. Like sus chords, either sus 2 or sus 4 chords, are specific to the 80s. And this is not correct at all. Suspended chords have been used in jazz since the beginning of the last century. And in a pop or rock background or context, they were used and abused since the 50s and 60s by the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and also in the 70s, The Who, and I would say a lot of bands in the 70s. So using sus chords, sus 2 or sus 4, in and of itself is not going to create a chord progression that sounds like it's from the 80s. Okay, so that's a misconception that I wanted to clear up. Also, there are no rules that mandate that you have to use sus chords at all. If you've been watching some of the live streams that I've been doing lately regarding chord progressions, how to create them with the chord leading charts and with the cadences and all of that, I haven't mentioned sus chords in any way, shape, or form. And the reason for that is that, again, sus chords, at least in formal music theory, you aren't mandated to use them if you don't like them. There are certain rules like cadences and chord leading, which yeah, you can use to your advantage, and I would say it's more there's more direction about that. When it comes to sus chords, it's simply a flavor. If you don't like it, you don't have to use it. Definitely try it out and experiment and find out if you can use it for yourself. But there are no rules. Like if someone were to ask, when do I have to use a sus chord in my progression? The answer is you don't have to use it at all if you don't like it, right? There's no mandate about that. Cool. It's all up to you and whether you like the flavor that they impart in a progression or that they lend the music. Having said that, sus chords are used prominently in synthwave by many artists. If you listen to Time Cop 1983 and a lot of other artists in the dreamwave scene, like off the top of my head, the what's her name, like The Last Concord, and that similar Time Cop 1983 kind of sound, which is slow to mid-tempo, dreamy, you will hear tons and tons of suspended chords being used. So again, if you want that kind of sound, then you better learn how to use sus chords. If you go to some darker sounds, let's say Perturbator, Dance with the Dead, or that kind of thing, maybe this may not be the right flavor for you. Who knows, right? In any case, caveat emptor, figure out for yourself if you like it or not. All right, cool. Enough of a preface. Let's get right into the meat of the matter. Okay, suspended chords. Here's reference. I have the C major scale, which is comprised of the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, like this. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Cool. The C major key, which is the harmonized major scale, includes these chords: C, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and B diminished. Typically in synthwave and in pop and rock, the diminished chord is something that we forget that it exists. It's better to leave it out unless you are really good in music theory and know what you're doing, because the diminished chord in any key, whether it's major or minor, is typically very dissonant. It's mostly used as a passing chord. You're not supposed to stay on a diminished chord like that, like you would stay on F, for example. Okay, so it needs a special treatment. So we're gonna completely forget that the diminished chord even exists. All right, so this is these are the chords of our major key, and in Roman numerals, I forgot to include that here. This would be the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6, and the 7 dim chord. Oops. Not strike through, but superscript. Okay, so these are the Roman numerals for our chords. Great. Coming back to suspended second and suspended fourth chords. Like I explained to you in the beginning, we're gonna, when we're building suspended chords, we're gonna replace the third with either the second or the fourth. And it has to be the diatonic second or diatonic fourth. What this means is that, let's call this the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A little bad example. What this means is that we're going to pick the second or the fourth that belongs to the scale. And I'll get to that in a second. Okay, so our first example, the C sus2 chord, and here in brackets, you see the what the home chord is in Roman numerals, or what the name of this chord in Roman numerals is. This is the 1 chord. The way that we're gonna build it is like this. Let me get my piano over here. Okay, a C major chord, it's C, E, G. If you look at the bottom right of the piano, okay. To create a suspended second, I'm going to remove the third. So I'm just gonna lift my finger, and I'm gonna play the second note. The second is the note that's to the left of the third. In this case, it's D. Okay, and what I meant by diatonic is that you have to use the second that's part of the scale. And as we see at the top, where it says a D major, the C major scale or C major key, we see that it's D natural. So I'm not going to play D sharp or D flat, right? To create this chord, I need to use natural D. And this is how it sounds. This is C major. It doesn't go anywhere. It's stable. If I remove the third and add the second, it's no longer a major chord. It's a different flavor. Unstable, tense, it's just a different color as opposed to C major. It doesn't want to go anywhere. It's super stable. C sus2 has more color, but it's no longer a major chord. Cool. Now we can create the C sus4 version by the same token. We have C, E, G, which is our standard C major. I'm going to remove the third and substitute it for the fourth degree. Going back to our example, this is our regular C major chord. I'm going to lift my finger, so I'm not going to play the third or E anymore. Now I'm going to add the fourth. And again, it's the diatonic fourth, meaning that it's got to be the fourth in the scale or key. And in the case of C major, it's F natural, not F sharp, or not, the F doesn't have a flat, but in any case, it has to be the same F or the same fourth degree as relates to the scale. So this is our C sus4 chord. C major chord, stable, doesn't want to go anywhere. C sus4, it's like it has momentum. It pushes us forward. It wants to go somewhere. If I just play this, our ears immediately want to do this. Go back to the C major, which is home, right? We have that inbuilt in our ears. That desire for this chord to go back home. Okay, we can use that to our advantage, and we will. Okay, so this is our C sus4 chord. And we can create the rest of the sus chords by following this same method. Just removing the third, whether it's a D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, we just remove the third and play the note right next to the third in the case of a second, suspended second, or remove our finger from our keyboard and play the next note to the right in the case of the fourth. And they have to be the note, it's whether it's natural, sharp, or flat according to the key. It has to be the diatonic second or fourth. Great. What I showed you here, in the case of C major, either of the two chords sound pretty good. Like the suspended second sounds nice. Suspended fourth sounds cool. Both of them work. And this same behavior, we have it for D minor, G major, A minor, and yeah, C major, which are the ones that I've marked in green. This means that in a major key, you can take the 1, 2, 5, and 6 degrees, and 6 chords rather, and either exchange them for the sus2 or sus4 versions, and they will sound good. Now, what happens with these two that are in red? These are the ones that I want to discuss next. So again, the 1, 2, 5, and 6 chords, you can suspend them either way, second or fourth, and they will sound good. That's not the same with E minor and F. You got to be careful because with these, one suspension sounds good, the other one sounds super tense. So you got to be super careful, okay? And it's the opposite in both cases. Okay, so let's tackle E minor. E minor is, let me do it here, E, G, B. Okay, we're going to remove the third and add F. Follow over here. Remove the third, G, which is grayed out, and I'm going to play the F. Okay, E minor. Listen to how the F sounds once it's an E sus chord. It sounds super tense because it's not really an E sus2, but an E sus flat 2. So this minor second between E and F is super tense. Okay, so E sus flat 2, or the sus2 version of E minor, it's very dissonant. It's not bad. If you wanted to create something very spooky and eerie like this, would be super cool, like for Halloween or horror synth or whatever. It sounds really nice. But in the context of Dreamwave, for example, or something a little bit less, or something a little bit more mainstream, if you will, this is a super tense sound, unless that's what you're going for. But on the flip side, the sus4 chord, here's our E minor, remove the third and add the fourth, it's pleasing to the ear. Cool. So once again, regarding E minor, we suspend one side and it's super tense, but the other side, more musical or less tense, more palatable, if you will. And the same thing happens with F, but the opposite is true. In this case, the F sus2 chord sounds very good. So here's our F major, lift the third, replace it with the second here, which is G. It sounds nice, musical, flavorful. But the other side, suspending the fourth, F major, remove the third, now I'm going to add B. This is not a regular perfect fourth, but a sharp four. And that gives us an indication that this is going to be more tense. Take a listen. Ooh, it's very tense. Okay, not that it's unusable, but certainly not quite as friendly as F sus2. So I could substitute F for F sus2 any day of the week, and it will sound cool. But substituting F major for the sus sharp 4, be careful about it. Again, unless that's what you're going for. Cool. So just to recap, before I proceed and see if there are any questions there in the chat, that's how you create the suspended second or fourth. You replace the third with either the second or the fourth diatonically, meaning you pick the second or the fourth that is stated by the scale. So whether it's natural, sharp, or flat, pick the whatever the scale dictates or mandates. Now, the other thing is that from the 7 chords in a key, like I mentioned, let's forget the diminished, the 1, 2, 5, and 6, you could suspend either way, sounds cool. Be careful with the 3 and the 4. All right, this is all in a major key, but then what happens in a minor key? Before we get there, let me see if there are any questions in the chat. Synthmage, thank you very much, my friend. Fish Stories, thank you very much for your support, guys. Really appreciate it. All right. Consider that minor keys are simply taking a major key and starting it from a different position. That's why, in the case of a major key, we have a relative minor, which is the sixth chord, or starting on the 6th chord or the 6th degree. So, in theory, the C major key has the same chords as the A minor key, just starting from a different point. So, having said that, so how do we know about the suspensions, suspended seconds or fourth in a minor key? Well, the same rules apply. At least the named chords, you treat them the same. They just have different Roman numerals. Okay, so let me break that out for you. In a minor key, the Roman numerals change. For example, A minor is the 1, C is the 3, and D minor is the 4. Whereas in C major, A minor was the 6, C was the 1, and D minor was the 2 chord. Okay, but the chord is still the same chord. A minor here is the same, C major is still the same, D minor is still D minor. Of course, if we're talking about this a major key and its relative minor. So you just changed the Roman numerals and changed the order, but the chords that you can suspend either way are still the same. C, D minor, G, and A minor are still the same here. A minor, C, D minor, and G. Oops, G. We still forget about D, B diminished, and we still have to treat specially E minor and F. Treat them carefully, okay? But it's the same thing ultimately. So you could either learn that in a major key, watch out for the 3 and the 4 chords, and in a minor key, watch out for the 5 and the 6 chord. Or you can forget about that complexity and only think about chords by their names. Like, for example, you have in the key of C major, A minor, C, D minor, and E minor. Out of those, you would know that E minor needs special treatment. But cool. We will look into some more of this once we get into the examples. All right. So, why do we want to substitute, and how can we use this? Great. I did some research and some soul searching and try to come up with a few ways to use them and explain them in a way that it's not music theory heavy. If you go online and look up when to use sus chords, you'll see the jazzy explanations about going to the dominant and blah, 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 and all of that, which doesn't really, when it comes to dominant 7 chords, doesn't apply too much to synthwave. So again, I tried to put this more into layman's terms and create a couple of, I would say, phrases or ways of using these this suspended and suspended second and fourth chords in a way that makes sense with synthwave. So if you go and look what I'm saying here online, you will not find it specified like this, right? So that's just one thing that I wanted to point out, that this is my interpretation and how I could best describe and explain it to you, so you can use the you can use this technology because it's technology in your music. So the first use is substituting for color. What I mean by this is that you can take any progression, for example, C, F, A minor, and G, which is a standard run-of-the-mill progression, and you can substitute one or more of the chords for their sus2 or sus4 variants or versions. You can just try them out randomly. You can, let's say, sus one of them. You could sus more, experiment with sus2 or sus4. You could do that to this chord, to this chord, this chord, or this chord, just to give your progression a different kind of flavor. Okay, so that's one reason for using sus chords. You first create a chord progression, let's call it a vanilla chord progression, with your chord leading charts and with the cadences, without using any additional notes like sevenths or add 6 or anything. You first create that vanilla progression, and then you say, you know what, this sounds cool, but let me add more color. So for example, this progression, C, F, A minor, G, sounds as vanilla as they come, right? It's like, you've heard that so many times. Okay, but I want to use this, but how can I give it more color? Okay. In this case, let's just suspend the second on the C chord. So we'll turn it into a C sus2. And this is the only one that I'm gonna vary, okay? So now our progression is, if I don't make any mistakes, like this. Listen to the C. It's a different flavor than this. Immediately, the progression has a little bit more flavor. Check it out. Let me bring up the piano so you can see some of this. So C sus2, I'm just playing the bass notes here. Okay. Back to C. So immediately, it has more of a dreamy vibe, a different flavor, just by substituting one of the chords with its sus variant. In this case, I chose sus2. I could have done sus4, like this. Does using sus2 sounds better than sus4? Sus4? Sus2? It's just different shades of a color, right? There's no right or wrong, like, oh man, the sus4 is this and the sus2 is completely another thing. They're kind of like two sides of the same coin. if you use them a lot, maybe for you one tastes like vanilla and the other one like, I don't know, French vanilla or whatever other kind of vanilla, but they're still kind of vanilla right at the end. So it's not no right or wrong. Just use your ears and find what you prefer. And the next example is instead of substituting or using C sus2, I'm going to go with C sus4 and F sus2, which coincidentally, C sus4 and F sus2 have the exact same notes. So this is cool because as I play this, notice how it feels like I stay on the same chord, but not really because I'm changing the bass. And this is also something that's quite used in synthwave a lot. So our C sus4 is this, C F G, and F sus2 is F, G, C, but I'm playing an inversion over here, so we end up using C, F, G, which is the same as C sus4. Cool, so our progression right now sounds like this. And if you hear this sus4 and the sus2 and the F, also have a very dreamy vibe. It's very colorful, very different from the standard vanilla chords. Cool, so this is one use or one way to deploy this technology, just substituting randomly one or more of your chords in your progression with the sus2 or the sus4 variants, and let your ears guide you. If you're just starting out in this path, I would say experiment with just varying one chord, because if you vary every chord, it would maybe sound just a little bit too much. Like when you're cooking and you add a little bit of pepper, it tastes great. But if you add a lot of pepper to everything, then like that flavor gets to be overwhelming and too much. So use it with caution. Experiment with less rather than more at the beginning. Cool. So that's substituting for color. Let's go and tackle the second example. What I call it is substituting to reduce the major or minor flavor in a progression. Remember that when we suspend, we are taking away the major or the minor flavor. Back to the pepperoni pizza example, if we replace pepperoni with mushroom, it's no longer a pepperoni pizza. So sometimes you have a progression where you say, gee, this sounds cool, but it sounds too major or maybe too minor, and you would like, let's say, to flatten the taste. When I say flatten, it doesn't mean like F, like in, I don't know, G sharp and G flat, like sharpening or flattening the tone. I mean like the taste, like making it less major or less minor. For example, here we have C and G. They sound, of course, super major. Hold on. Super major. If I wanted to keep this progression but make it sound more interesting, less vanilla, I could experiment with suspending either of the chords or both of them. And let's see what we get. In this case, let's do a suspended second. Let me bring back the piano. Okay, so the C sus2 example first. This is how it sounds now. Very different from C major. C sus2. The C major chord sound has been kind of washed away, diminished, reduced, flattened, as I like to call it. It doesn't have that major quality anymore. It's still colorful, it's still bright, a little tense, maybe. But that majorness, if you will, has been washed away, reduced. Let's do the next example with C sus4, because like I mentioned, it's just two similar flavors. None is better than the other. So let's do C4. Maybe you could say that C+4 sounds happier, I don't know, more exciting. Who knows? But back to the vanilla progression. C major, G major, C major, C+4. It feels different, right? Cool. That's the way that you can reduce the major or the minor flavor. Now let's try it with a progression that has a minor in it. For example, this one. This progression goes C to A minor. Again, super vanilla. Vanilla as it gets. And this is one of the things about music theory and music in general, is that you can take very simple stuff like this, a C major to an A minor progression, and just tweak it a little bit with a little bit of knowledge. That's why I say music theory goes a long way. And with just a little, you can do a lot of damage in a good way. You don't have to be Mozart or Bach to get the benefits of music theory, but it can unlock so much for you. Because right now we say we have this progression. Oh, it's super vanilla. If we didn't know this, we would try to find some other chords, but maybe the chords are not the problem. Is that we could give them a little flavor or change them a little bit and not have to necessarily go and find a new progression, right? So it's not necessarily the progression. So in this case, let's edit or vary the A minor chord and turn it into a sus2 chord. Just as a reminder, this is A minor, has a super minor flavor, obviously, but if I play the sus2 version, it's no longer minor. It does sound a little mysterious, like up there in the air, but no longer minor. So let's use that. Okay, let me see. sus2. All right. I'm gonna play a C inversion because it's better for me that way. Okay, so C major, A sus2, oops, wrong suspension. Once again. And it sounds very different from this. Right? Back to the suspensions. It reminds me of the Police, like early the Police in the Invisible Sun album. To remember if it was Synchronicity or one of those. The Police, if you listen to them, they used a lot of suspended seconds and suspended fourths everywhere. Every breath you take, and Message in a Bottle. Almost all of those tracks have a ton of suspended second and fourths, which lends their music a special quality. I'm gonna play this example just once again. Oops. C major, the suspended. It has way more flavor. Listen to this. It went from boring, like this, vanilla, major and minor, to more flavor. Cool, completely different thing. All right, so that's a way to substitute to reduce the major or minor flavor of a chord in a progression, or to reduce the major or minor flavor in your progression overall, right? Cool. Another tool in your tool belt, guys. Pretty cool stuff here. Let me check if there are any questions here. BSOD. It sounds like a DX7. It's a Korg M1 and definitely sounds it's going after that electronic piano sound from the 80s. Suspended fourth, just my topic. Hey, cool. All right. Third use of suspensions is to force pedal points. And this technique is also very popular in synthwave. Again, you may not find it like this, or people don't openly discuss it, and this is why I'm bringing you this stuff, guys, because I want you to use the tools and make the music that's in your heart, professional grade, black belt grade synthwave. Okay, so what's a pedal point? A pedal point in formal music theory is when you hold one tone or more across a chord progression. Okay, there's a more of a technical definition, but that's just my definition, and the easy way to think of a pedal point is just one tone that you hold across your entire progression. Okay, typically, great pedal tones are the tonic and the dominant of the key, not of the particular chord, but of the key. Those are really good to play as pedal points across your entire progression. So let's say we have this progression C, F, G, and A minor. It sounds like this. Super vanilla. Oopsie daisy. This is super vanilla. Where was I? Okay, here. Now, what we could do is, let's say if we were playing a pad, or just if we wanted the chords in the progression to sound more cohesive, like we're not changing chords so often, like, right? Like we want to use fewer notes, then that's where we would force pedal points. Let me do. Oops. I think this example will sound better with a pad. So our original progression is C, F, G major, A minor, okay? To force a certain note to be played across my entire progression, in this case, I'm going to choose C, okay? C is included in C major, C is included in, or is part of the F major chord. C, however, is not part of a natural G chord, and C is part of an A minor chord. So if I really wanted a note to cut across or to be used as pedal point, right, to gel our entire chord progression together, C is one of the ones that I could use. Like I mentioned, the tonic of the key or the dominant are great candidates for this. So what I would do is I'm going to change G so it has C in it. And the way that I can do it is I have G major here, okay, and if I get rid of the third and play C, now this is our G sus4 chord. So in this case, I forced G to become a suspension just so I could play C on top of all my chords. And this would sound something like this. Let me see if I can find the right inversions. Okay, I'm gonna try to play C on top because that's the pedal note that I want to gel my chord progression together. So I want to play it at the top so it really sticks out. So I'm going to use inversions for the other chords in the progression. Okay, so I'm going to play C like this. F. G. A minor. Okay, I'm going to play with the bass notes. Where was I? Super heavenly and lovely, right? This is a very cool sound, for sure. I could have chosen, for example, to use G, but I just didn't want to do it in this progression because G, let me see. No, actually, I thought about F, but F would become the seventh. Would turn this chord into dominant seventh, so I didn't want that. But in any case, you can just pick and choose one of the notes that are shared amongst many of your chords. I could have picked A, maybe, right? Because A is naturally included in F major and in A minor. So if I played A inside C, it would turn into a C major 6, and this would be a G sus2. and call this F. It will be something like this. Let me see if I can make it happen. All right. Similar sound, but not exactly. And again, you can use any pedal point you want, and you would end up changing the chords, and most likely one or two or more would end up being suspensions. Great. So this is the reason. Another third example of how to use suspensions is to force pedal points to glue together a chord progression by having one or more sustained tones across your chord progression. All right, I apologize because there's an annoying lawnmower somewhere in the distance. In any case, let's soldier on. Another great use, number 4, is use suspensions to alternate chords to create movement in your progression. And this is called creating internal resolutions. And this is also something that's used a lot in Synthwave that you may have not recognized until this point. So what do we mean by this? Let's say we have a vanilla progression such as C major and G major. Let me get back to my trusty E-piano sound. Cool. Okay, so it's C and then G. Cool. But even if I played something rhythmic like this, there's rhythmic movement, but there's no harmonic movement. It's just the same chord played in a rhythm or pattern. Okay. However, I could, inside the patterns that I'm playing while I'm on C, I could play the C sus2 and C sus4, go back and forth, just to give the pattern more movement. For example, like this. I'm still playing C, but I'm alternating between C sus2 and C, and that gives the music a lot of movement. The same with the G. I could have picked C sus4, something like this. Oh, let me do it differently. And I'm sure you've heard this a lot in Synthwave. For example, if I were to do this, for example, this, in theory, I'm doing A minor, but then I'm playing what would this be? A sus2. It's actually a sus4 and sus2. And I'm still playing an A minor chord, but I'm giving it that harmonic movement by playing with the C sus2 and C sus4 notes that typically are to the left or to the right of the finger playing the third, which is why on the keyboard it's very easy to include the seconds and the fourths. For example, here, I just, with the finger that I'm not holding down E with, I can play this second, and with my fourth finger I can play this and alternate like this, and it sounds cool. And I'm sure you've heard that 1,000 times in the Synthwave, and it's a great technique and a great tool. Alternating to give the progression more of a harmonic movement. And this is especially handy if you are in a slow tempo, let's say 80 or 90 BPM, because in that case, the bars would become super long. For example, something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. It's almost like an eternity. 1, 2. And even if you create some kind of rhythm like this, it's still like super sluggish and boring. However, if we use suspensions, and all I'm doing is alternating between the bass chord, which is the major chord, and its sus2 or sus4 variants. So this is very cool. And every time I go from a sus2 back to its root chord, or from a sus4 back to its root, that is called an internal resolution. And that is a music theory concept that you can look up and study some more. So every time I go from the suspended to the bass chord, that's an internal resolution. Whether I'm going from the suspended second to the bass chord, or from the suspended fourth to the bass chord, it's still an internal resolution. That's a very, very useful sound in Synthwave. Cool, that's example number 4. All right. Yeah, alternating suspended chords were very popular in the 80s. I think that's Cold as Ice by don't remember who. And all I'm doing is alternating between A minor and the suspended fourth version of A. Very useful. Cool. The next one we're going to tackle is creating and easing tension. And this one you will find when you read up online on how to use suspended chords. This will be mentioned a lot, like creating and easing tension. So what do we mean by this? We have, in this case, let's say vanilla G. Again, now A minor, and then F. Cool. G, G, A minor. Cool. The sus versions of a chord create tension and create a desire to move somewhere. So instead of playing G twice, what we could do is withhold G and first play either the sus2 or sus2 version, so our ears are screaming to go to G. Okay, so in this case, instead of playing 2 bars of vanilla and boring G, we can create tension here and then resolve it here on this second bar, which overall will give our progression much more flavor, much more character, and it's going to be more satisfying to listen to than the vanilla version. So this is how it sounds. Okay, G sus4. Okay, let's bring back the keyboard. Let me see if I can pull it off. Okay, so it's going to be G sus4. I'm going to do it slowly. Nice. Hear how the first G sus4, it's screaming to go to natural G. And we feel that resolution, the tension, the resolution. Move on. Ooh, that's satisfying. The tension again. Resolve. Cool. E minor, the F. So every time we play this, there's a little tension and resolution inside every chord progression, or every round of the chord progression, which is very cool. And of course, in this case, I chose to suspend the G, but I could have done the same thing, and in this case, just substituted A minor for A sus4. Well, this is a different example. Let's say this was say the original was G, G, A minor, and A minor. we can do a double whammy of this same technique. So we'll do the sus4, resolve here, the A sus4, and resolve here. So it's going to be like 2 rounds of tension and release inside the same chord progression over and over again. Much more flavor and much more color. Let's see if I can pull this off, guys. Okay. Back to G. A sus4. Now the vanilla version. Nothing wrong with it, but it's a vanilla. Once we know the other version, it's like we don't want to go back to vanilla. Again, the suspended version. Whoops. Hold on. Very, very nice. Very useful. Again, the intention of creating tension and release in your progressions, we can do that by withholding the, let's say, the bass chord or the normal major and minor in by playing one of the sus chord versions instead before it. All right. The 6th use is a method or a tool concept called triad over root. Now, triad over root, as its name implies, you're playing 3 notes over a root. Now, what's the if all chords typically, for example, C major, is playing the C major triad C G on top of C, and D minor is D F A on top of D. Now, what's the deal with triad over root? This technique or this concept of triad over root, what you do is you play a different triad than what you would have expected on top of the root. So for example, if we have a progression that's C, A minor, G, and F, I'm not gonna play the appropriate triads on top of the roots. So the roots are still gonna be C, A, G, and F, but I'm gonna play a different triad on top of that. And when I do it, I'm going to artificially create suspensions, sus2, sus4s, major 6 chords, major 7 chords, a whole bunch of different colors I'm going to unlock if I play a different triad than as normal or expected on top of a root. So in this case, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna play a C sus4 triad on top of the bass notes of my progression. And you'll hear that it's gonna sound completely different, more flavor, more color, still in the same ballpark as it was before, but now it is more dreamy, less intentional in terms of major and minor chords, like less tonal and directional from that perspective, but it's a super dreamy and useful sound. So let me bring back my keyboard. Like I said, I'm gonna play C sus4, which is C, F, G, on top of all the bass notes of my progression, okay? And in this case, I am choosing to play the same triad, C sus4, on top of every bass note. It doesn't have to be this way. What I call this is a pedal triad over root, and I call it pedal because when we touched upon pedal tones, which is a tone that you hold or play throughout a progression, for me, a pedal triad over root is just taking like a fixed shape. I've also talked about that in my videos, taking a fixed shape or just the same triad and playing it on top of different bass notes, but I'm not changing the triad. I'm only playing, changing the bass notes. It has a particular sound. Again, C, F, G. Now I'm gonna play the bass notes of my progression, which are C, A minor, G, and F. And pay attention to how this sounds. First, I'm gonna do the normal triads over the roots, as you would expect. Listen. Vanilla, vanilla. Now the triad over root using the pedal C sus4. And it's very cool because the C sus4 triad will sound more tense on top of certain bass notes because it will suggest a certain chord. Our ears will complete a chord, listen to the bass and listen to the C sus4. But on other bass notes, it's going to be more tense, less tense, more resolved, less resolved. So just by holding the same shape on my right hand, but changing the bass tones, we go through a whole range of tension and resolution, kind of on autopilot, if you will, right? Without thinking about whether it's a 6th chord, a 7th chord, whatever chord, 11th chord. We're just using a very simple technique to create that kind of dreaminess. And this technique especially is not only super useful with block chords, the way that I've been playing it so far, like this, but when you break up and play broken chords, which are arpeggios or certain figures and lines that resemble an arpeggio, then I'm sure you've heard this thousands of times on synthwave tracks, something like this. That's also a very, very useful sound for dream wavy stuff because, again, these triads that I'm playing over the roots will create more colorful chords than the ones that I've wrote here or input here in my spreadsheet. So it's a very easy way or simple way to create flavorful colors. And again, if you now once win this masterclass, go to listen to a lot of Dreamwave, and you'll find that very often you have a bass line playing a chord progression, and you have some kind of melodic element, whether it's an arpeggio doing this, or maybe just playing it a little bit more broken out, a little bit more melodic like this. You'll listen to this a lot. And if you've ever wondered what notes can I use to play on top of that bass line that I know are going to sound well, that's the way to get there, experimenting with C sus2, C sus4 chords. And here I chose to do the C sus4 variant. I could have chosen C sus2, and now it sounds completely different. Pay attention. Different. Now, what if I, instead of playing a C triad or C chord, what if I did a sus4? What would that sound like? Cool. Very mysterious. Very, very useful technique. Triad over root. Both as a block chord and broken in strict arpeggios like this, or in open position, obviously. You can open it up, but and also playing these melodic figures. Stuff like that. Super useful. All right, and that gets us to our final example. Take a sip of water, see if there are any questions in the chat. All right, the intro for Erasure's Little Respect. Yeah, I think I had already mentioned that, but in any case, yeah, certainly. And after this masterclass, again, you go back and listen to a lot of 80s stuff. Not only 80s, because that's one of the caveats that I mentioned at the beginning. Listen to a lot of Rolling Stones, a lot of the Beatles, and a lot of 70s stuff like The Who, Genesis. You'll hear suspended chords and all of these techniques put to great use and abuse, and that'll give you a lot of ideas. The final thing that I want to leave you with is we've talked about suspending a chord, which is replacing the third for the second or for the fourth. So it's no longer a major or a minor chord. However, what if we take a major or a minor chord and add, I'm not replacing the third, but I'm going to add the second or the fourth. And that's where we get an add 2 or add 4 chord. And you may have seen this if you've looked up tablature for playing guitar or piano. You may see stuff like, for example, C6, C at 9, F at 9, or whatever, G at 2. And these add, there's rules of how to call these things, but in any case, if we see an add, let me just make this easier. Get rid of this one. An add 2 chord is simply you take a regular F major chord and add the second. Okay, so I'm not removing the third and replacing it for the second. This would be an F sus 2, but an F add 2, it's your bass chord with an additional flavor. So back to our pizza, we had pepperoni pizza. Now we're adding mushrooms, or I don't know, bell peppers. So it's still pepperoni, but now with an additional flavor, or anchovies, whatever you fancy. Okay, so it preserves the major or the minor quality, but we're giving it a little bit of a kick. And definitely, when you add the second or you add the fourth to a major or to a minor chord, it's going to be more tense than the suspended versions. It's going to have more color. So that's also another choice that you have. Let's take a listen. This is C major, C sus 2, but C add 2 includes all the notes. So in this, what's the word that I'm trying to get? Well, forget this. It's not a bundle, block. Well, in any case, these three notes that are bundled together create a lot of tension and color. So this is C add 2, C sus 2, major chord with more color. Now the C add 4, more notes together creates more tension. The same with the minor variants, in this case A minor. Let me add the second. This is how it sounds now. Tense, eerie, but definitely minor. The same if I add the fourth. Very cool. Now I'm using this as a pedal, or actually as a chord over root. Changing the bass lines. And of course, I could play any inversion I want, and this applies also to all the examples that I've shown you. For example, then this turns into this, which is different. Okay, so you can take this concept of the add 2 and add 4 and go back and review all the examples, and instead of substituting, use it there. So we're going to use the add 2 or add 4 for color. We're going to use the add 2 or add 4 versions to, let's say, enhance the flavor of major or minor or make it more tense. We can use it to force pedal points, and we can also alternate. So instead of the regular vanilla C major like this, you can do. And I'm sure you've heard that in Synthwave before. Okay, same as with creating an easing tension. Instead of doing, let's say, C, in this case, well, let's say G, just as this example. Instead of playing regular vanilla G, I'm going to play the add 2. More flavor. Same idea, but more flavor. And finally, of course, the triad over root, which is the first thing that I showed you in this A minor example. I'm adding here the fourth, and I can play this fixed shape, or this chord over root rather. It's no longer a triad since I'm playing 4 notes. I'm doing a chord over root over different bass lines. Very, very, very useful. Great stuff, my friends. Really great stuff. Alrighty, as we come to the end of this masterclass or session, let me review my notes and see if there's anything else that I wanted to mention. Alright, so definitely experiment with all the techniques that I showed you today. Go back, watch this, take notes, take a screenshot or whatever, and try it out on your own. You could spend a few minutes every day if you have a piano or your MIDI controller and play by alternating between the major or the minor versions of a chord and its associated suspended second or suspended fourth, going back and forth and taking just regular vanilla progressions and replacing or substituting with the sus2 or sus4 chord variants, just to get that sound in your ear, and also to get that feeling of what things you like, what you don't like. Maybe your music, this will fit like a glove, right? If you're going for the dreamy kind of synthwave, this will help you tremendously. But if you're going for a different kind of flavor, then this may not be that helpful on every track. But maybe once in a while, you can use this for, I don't know, for a certain section or for a certain track where you're going for a specific sound. So again, you have to learn how to use these things just for you to have it as another tool in your tool belt. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, right? And learn to use this flavor in the context of your music. And I'm sure, again, if you watch this replay, as I was playing some of these examples, you can now connect the dots and say to yourself, hey, I've heard this kind of technique before and I didn't know what it was. Now you know what it is, and you can deploy it at your will and discretion. Alrighty, I don't see any questions coming in. So I really hope, guys, that you found this useful. As always, do let me know if you have any questions or comments. I read all the comments and questions that come through. I love answering them. And also send me suggestions for future videos, stuff that I haven't covered or stuff that you want me to cover again, whatever. I'm always looking for new ideas, and I'm going to be very excited to add anything that you want into my backlog or pipeline of videos. In any case, thank you very much for joining. I'll see you in the next one, and keep synthwaving, my friends. Keep doing great work. See you in the next